So as we're finishing up, just tell me a little bit about Marvel Snapshots. I'm actually not that familiar with the series. Can you tell me what it's about and when it came out?
Um, Marvel Snapshots came out. The schedule was affected by the pandemic. Our issue came out, and then I think it got stopped. They're all Snapshot. It's based on the Marvel series that Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross did, which is very well known, very popular. And I think this is an anniversary of that project. So Alex Ross is curating a series called Marvels with the Marvels, and Kurt Busiek is curating Marvel Snapshots, which are single issues. The thing about Marvels was that it was a breakdown of like the early Marvel universe, but as seen from the point of view of regular people, a reporter, a photographer, people like that. It was seen through his eyes and the eyes of his family. So it was like all the ancillary events happening around all the major Marvel events, very heavy continuity, very, very, in the know. But so major events that happened in the Silver Age and onto the Bronze Age, I guess, were seen through the eyes of people on the streets, what it was like when these things were happening. It would be like if you had a character watching a Godzilla attack from ground zero, from below, and thinking about everything that happened, but this is just spread out over years and explaining the Marvel universe as people saw it, if it was real, kind of. And the Marvel Snapshots is just continuing on that. It's 6 different stories riffing on Marvel characters and touch points. So Kurt asked us to do a pretty lighthearted story about the girlfriend of the Human Torch from back in the day in the 60s, and what it was like to date a superhero and kind of fall out of that life. But it was also based around his idea of a reunion, a high school reunion, and a kind of where are they now, and a kind of high school story, but also a Johnny Storm, the Human Torch story, about taking parts of his old continuity that kind of don't make sense because they Marvel, again, the same way that I was talking about how Beast of Burden wasn't designed from the beginning. A lot of Marvel comics and DC, a lot of things don't get designed from the first year of a TV show or a comic book. You might not guess what characters are going to be taken to heart by the audience. You don't know that that Fonzie is going to be a hit, and that you should dump Spike and get rid of the other, the Richie Cunningham brother, and you know what I'm saying? Ralph Mouth should have been killed, things like that, but they didn't. So you don't know what's going to take off. You don't know. You have more stuff for your side character. Like Geordi. Is it Geordi? No, whoever the kid is in Star Trek: The Next Generation. You feel like they had a lot more planned for him, but he just didn't click. You know what I mean? And other characters assert themselves. I mean, Wolverine. Wolverine was a character who knew that he'd become Wolverine. He was a short, angry dude with stupid claws and a really silly costume, which I loved, by the way.
He was a throwaway bad guy because the Hulk went to Canada. Like they
Yeah,
just
the Hulk
had
was,
to come up with the most Canadian bad guy
and
they could.
they had a Wendigo, so they had a Wolverine show up, which it could have been the Mountie, or it could have been the
Beaver. The Wolverine almost was the Beaver.
It could have been the Maple Leaf, or any of the characters that John Byrne had later on for Alpha Squad. I mean, it could have been the what's the name of that coin? The one that's $2. The two. I can't remember now. But yeah, it could have been the Mackenzie brothers or something like that. It could have been the Slapshot, the hockey boy, and it would have been great if it was the Hanson brothers. But that's a whole. So it wasn't. That stuff wasn't planned as to how it would work out. So if you read the early adventures of the Human Torch, who was being positioned by Stan Lee as the Spider-Man, the other Spider-Man, young, except that he had a secret identity. Dumbest idea on earth, considering the fact that he's named Johnny Storm. His sister is the Invisible Girl. Everybody knows who she is. Everybody knows who the FF is. He lives in town, goes to high school. He's the Human Torch. They know that. So we, part of it was to explain some of this dumb shit. And I'm like, he burned through people's cars. He acted like a dick. I mean, he was a hothead. That was his character in a nutshell. But those early stories are insane because they all take place in a small town. It's almost like if Beast of Burden was a superhero. They all take place in his small town in Long Island, but every issue they need a supervillain to show up. Why would a supervillain come to like Long Island and just happen to show up where the Human Torch is? And they're the dumbest characters. That's where Paste Pot Pete, the guy who uses glue to stick people, the eel, the plant man who looks really ridiculous in his first, he can make plants do things. I mean, the acrobat, what does he do? He's an acrobat. Holy shit. And these are the comics that we like deify and say, let's go back to these old great, all these dummies are saying, let's go back to these old times. Christ. They'd shit if we went back to Paste Pot Pete and the painter, the evil painter of evil things who painted stuff that came to life. Whatever. But it's fun. So we did this one issue and I was very happy with it. And we got to work with Benjamin Dewey, who we work with on Beast of Burden, who Kurt works with on a series called Autumn Lands, which is where I saw Ben's work with animals, because they're all bipedal anthropomorphic animal humans, like kind of Islands of Dr. Moreau. And he draws beautifully, but he draws beautiful animals, which is very difficult. And we needed somebody like that when Jill was no longer going to work on the book. So yeah, that's the one shot, and that's collected in Marvel Snapshots. Is a hardcover that came out a couple of weeks ago, I guess. We don't have it yet. Hopefully we'll get one because we don't have the comics. Marvel lost track of some stuff when COVID forced shutdown. So I've only seen the comic. I signed a whole bunch of them. I should have kept one. But there's 6 stories, I think, and they all have Alex Ross covers. And one's a Submariner story in the 40s. Ours is modern. It was really weird trying to acclimate the weird thing about Marvel where, back in the day, JFK was president and then you have Nixon but they've only been here actually for only 7 years. And the Beatles, they hung out with, it was weird to take all those stories and try to shove them together along with a few odd appearances of the Human Torch in retcon stuff that came out a few years ago. It's so weird to work with Marvel real time, or what, I don't know what they even call it, but Kurt knows all this shit and it was his story. We did a script on it and I had a great time working on that, putting in a ton of Easter eggs and dopey things for the fans to see, and if they don't get it, that's fine, it's still background information. I mean, I got to have the Beetle and all these dumb characters, like the asbestos man. Guy dresses up in asbestos, so of course he's got cancer. I think he's dead now in the Marvel universe. So that was cool. We did that about a year and a half ago, and the collection's just come out. People can grab that. And that's what Marvel Snapshots is. Now, I do a job for Marvel every 10 years, apparently. Like I worked for them in 91. And in 2003, I did a bunch of work for them. And then I just missed, but I think I may have just gotten in for the 2010s, the teens. But Kurt hired us for that. Marvel, I don't know if Marvel knows who we are anymore. That was Kurt. So I thank him for that. That was really great. That was a good, cool. As they say in wrestling, he gave us the rub there.
Very cool. So before I let you go, can you tell me how people can follow you online, and tell me a little bit about your Patreon and how people can get commissions and buy original art from you?
Cripes. Well, my Patreon is just Evan Dorkin. I guess you just go to it and find it that way, right? I don't know. Can you hang a second? I'll look. I'm so on top of things. Okay, so it's just patreon.com/Evan Dorkin. I'm sure a lot of people would like to /Evan Dorkin. I said that like Groucho Marx, except it didn't sound like him. And that's, patreon.com/Evan Dorkin. My Twitter handle is Evan Dorkin. If you like my art more than my babbling, my Instagram handle is Evan Dorkin. It's Evan Dorkin at Instagram, I guess. And that's where I put a lot of art up, drawings that I do up for sale. We do lottery sales of my little drawings. And my Patreon has, I offer my original art and certain things as exclusives to patrons. They get first shot at certain levels, like $3 and up. They get first shot at original art sales, and original art sales that have discounts or free shipping when I hold one of those. Usually when there's an emergency, like I needed to have a tooth removed. Well, I still need to have the tooth removed, but I had an infection, had to go to the hospital in an emergency, and no insurance, so that was exciting. And I sell original art. I have a, if you go to, God, this is so silly. I think it's called houseoffunstudio.com, because houseoffunstudio.com is where you'll find a link to my really terrible original art for sale page, which has no images, just descriptions. But now I can just take a camera picture of the art and send it to you. And there's still a lot of stuff left. I'm out of most Milk and Cheese and Dork pages are gone now. A lot of Eltingville pages are gone. All my superhero stuff, Fight Man, Bill and Ted, all gone. But I put new stuff up, and commissions. The commissions list is closed right now. I am trying to catch up on late commissions because I ended up with more of them than I expected, and I took all of those on, and then I got work that I wasn't expecting, and so I'm a little thrown off on that right now, and I want to get everyone's done before I take a new list. That list starts first with Patreons, and then it goes to Instagram, and then it goes to Twitter. So it doesn't really get to Twitter, or, just saying that. You don't have to join the Patreon, though. But also, my email is evandorkin@gmail.com. If somebody just has a question, follow up on anything, or they're confused by something I said, I don't mind answering questions when I can get to them. Or something I said, you want to know more about, I can maybe lead you in the right direction, or tell you I don't know, because that's the best thing you can say when you don't know is I don't know. And I think that's everything. I'm going to start doing process stuff on my, I've been trying to do process stuff on my Patreon, showing drawing and live streaming stuff. I did a test last year, but my connection is not great. I'm really happy that the connection is not falling apart. I don't know if it's because it's later, but I've unfortunately been kicked out of at least 2 interviews now, and I've had some Zoom meetings type things where I had to, turn off my camera or leave because my the magic internet thing is not very good up here or in my office. And the router, is that it? The router. The router's in the basement, and I can't set up in there. There's just nowhere to do it. So I think that's everything. You can find me if anybody is still listening and wants to find me.
Now, do you have anything coming out later in the year that you want people to keep an eye out for?
Why, yes, I do. What is coming out? I don't know if this is out. If the video is still working, Supergirl, Girl of Steel, Supergirl Adventures has 2 of the Supergirl comics that Sarah and I wrote after we worked on the Superman, the animated series. We wrote 4 episodes for. We used a lot of background material that we came up for the Supergirl introduction, and Sarah had the idea, why don't we do a comic? And we did a giant size issue with her using a lot of stuff that we couldn't fit in our script or in the backstory. And then we did a sequel to that, and that's from DC. It's a digest that'll be out. It's $10, all ages. We worked on this with people. Brett Blevins, who did storyboards from the show and has done a lot of comics work. He's great. And Terry Austin inked it, so we got to work with Terry Austin, going back to the old X-Men discussion that we had when he was inking Byrne. I was always a fan. I don't know if the Bizarro collection is out. Because again, DC is very on top of their comps. I will always say that. This collects Bizarro Comics and Bizarro World, which is all lots of people. This is one I drew that Ivan Brunetti wrote. A lot of independent and small press cartoonists with some, oddball people like Pat Oswald and whatnot. But a lot of, it's a who's who of small press and indie press cartooning around 2002, 2003. The big fat hardcover. Nobody saw those in the first place. And it'll look like, it won't look, this is not the book, but Occupied Territory will look like this, but it will say Occupied Territory. That's the fourth Beast of Burden book, and it will be out October, November. I think it's really good. Benjamin did a beautiful job on it. Sarah helped make that script sing. Everything is just, I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy with it. It's just great monster horror adventure yokai comics. And I've got a few things coming out, but the way you know, something you've had to get used to, talking about change in the industry. It used to be that you could talk about everything. You could show art, but as things have become more big business and like little Hollywood in comics, and I get it, because now we have press schedules, which we, you know what I mean? Don't show this art because we're going to premiere it with this. I mean, it's funny to have press. I mean, I get it, and you don't want to make life harder on the PR people and on the marketing people, but it's sometimes so confusing when you're like, well, we have a press cycle on this thing, and then like there's no press cycle. There's no, you know what I mean? Dark Horse sends stuff out and does stuff, and nobody responds. So it's like crickets. So you might as well have just showed shit to your fans and gotten them excited. It's a weird, hard game to play. But I've got a couple of things that I can't show. I'm doing hopefully an interview, a comic book interview thing that will involve some art. I'm doing a few comic related things that are milk and cheese related, but are not comics, illustration stuff that I'll be announcing. I usually announce stuff on my Patreon first, but I announce stuff pretty quickly on Instagram and Twitter. So it's not like people have to give me $1 a month. But like, you know, the Patreon is really, really good for us. You know, I work hard to maintain it. We're going to put more stuff up. We're trying to do a thing where we can send postcards out every couple of months to people at a certain level with new art as just a thank you. And we've given books away and stuff like that. And, you know, since it's just Sarah and I and most of me, because Sarah's got a million other things to be doing for the house, and right now she's coloring something and working on something of mine. That it's a little hard with my technology stuff to get certain things up, but I post a couple of times a week. I put new art up when I have it and can show it, and then I put process up. I think that's $3 up, but people can join for just $1. And if they like this kind of ranting and raving and showing stuff, it's $12 a month, which is like the cost of 3 comics. And I try to put out way more than 3 comics worth of entertainment and information and comic book industry background and personal insight. And you know, it's a blog, and it's a retrospect of my career, because and it's what I'm working on and moving forward. So yeah, I've got a bunch of illustration jobs and things that I'm working on, and I've got some gag strips and things like that I'm doing for, like, the fun strips from Dork. I put, when I do a new one, I put it up on the Patreon, and I've been putting old ones up on my Twitter. And I've talked a lot. I don't think there's anything else you could want me to say or hear.
Well, actually, I mean, I'm gonna. Well, if there's anything else you want people to know about, feel free to say so. But there was a whole section of questions I was going to ask you about Space Ghost.
Okay, I love Space Ghost. I will not mind talking about Space Ghost. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, Space Ghost. We got Space Ghost because of the Milk and Cheese comic. That's another thing. The comics themselves might not make you rich or famous, or even comic book rich or famous, but if you can tell jokes and stuff, like I said before about wearing different hats, if you're telling jokes. Sarah does production work, design, and she could do prints. So we brought a lot. Color work. She did the color design on the Elting. When we did Eltingville, we did almost everything. We did a lot of things that other people would have normally done. You know, we did character design, the Bible. She script edited. She designed the color work. You know, it's good to be able to do more things, because that way, if you don't end up making your splash as an X-Men artist or Batman artist, you can work on other independent things, or you can work in other industries that are related or adjacent. You know, I mean, working in animation, I like comics more, to be honest, but animation certainly was more exciting in some ways, and definitely paid better, even when the pay was not very good, because comics is just comics. But Space Ghost was the first show that we worked on. And that was because of Milk and Cheese. The dialogue on Milk and Cheese, Mike Lazo, the creator of the show, somebody gave him the collection, the old SLG collection, and he thought that maybe it could be, that I could write Zorak and Moltar decently, because it was in the early days of the show and they were working. And speaking of not knowing where your show's going, that was back when there was still, first season was running, and they were producing shows for the first season, and they were still calling Zorak a locust, because they didn't realize he's a mantis. So if you remember, they had jokes about that back in the day. So, so yeah, shoot. Ask me what you will about Space Ghost.
Well, I'm fascinated by that whole era of Adult Swim. Just to give a little bit of background, Space Ghost was a show, before there really was an Adult Swim.
It was, yeah. It was pre-Adult Swim, yeah.
Turner bought the Hanna-Barbera library, and they had all these characters. And Mike Lazo was actually just a programmer, just a guy who had to find slots for all these shows, discovered that there was a few empty slots, and decided he was going to reuse some of this old animation to make a weird little like art school talk show thing. Is that more or less correct?
He had a dream about Space Ghost interviewing people. Okay. And and then there's a Space Ghost pilot that you may have seen that was made with Andy, the Brack guy. Oh God, Andy
Merrill?
I feel terrible. Yes. And Andy Merrill was in a costume part of it. And it was a different looking, they spent apparently more money on this weird pilot that didn't run. It's around. I'm sure it's on one of the DVDs probably, if not on YouTube and crap like that. But there was an initial pilot where they didn't have any celebrity guests. They were just telling you what this thing would be about. And they had pictures of celebrities on the screen. It was very, very cheaply done, obviously. And not super clean or firm. I mean, the show, Space Ghost is a cheap show, but you know what I mean? It's not like there's photographs that are being whisked off of the screen. And maybe there are. And then they eventually just, the show doesn't cost much. And I think they were putting on Space Ghost with a laugh track on after it, the old episodes. And they were putting on episodes of Birdman, or they were putting Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They were slotting it 2 11-minute shows. So they would, to fill out after Space Ghost, they would throw on an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon and sometimes put a laugh track on it, if I remember correctly. But the show ended up getting them really great press. The show never was really super successful. It had a good audience for what it was, especially when it got weirder, and kind of sometimes outright purposely irritating. There are episodes that people just divided people and drove people crazy, like Storybook, the old guy telling the Space Ghost stories or something, and a few others.
Wasn't there an episode where they looped the entire episode? They played the episode twice?
There's an episode where they redid the episode or something like that. Is a second version of it. And then there's the Sonny Sharrock episode, which is mostly music or something. When you're doing an 11-minute show that costs very little money, and Lazo was running the Adult Swim at that by a later point, Space Ghost was just a pet project that never really got past pet project, but it also got them Cartoon Planet material, and it got them the Brack Show, and it sold some t-shirts and things like that. But from what I understand, from what people told me back in the day, the thing about Space Ghost was that Space Ghost got them amazing recognition and press from magazines, mainstream media, hipsters, you know what I'm saying? the show, it was a cult show and it attracted a cult audience, but a lot of people in that cult audience were writers and freelancers and people filling up magazines and versioning websites and things like that. So Space Ghost became very hip. People wanted to be on the show kind of the way that people wanted to be on the old Batman show. Eventually, then people didn't want to be on the show because they didn't want to be made fun of and they didn't want to be jerky. So it was hard getting good guests. Plus, once you've seen Space Ghost for a few episodes, you kind of knew what to expect. So some guests would go in there with their own ideas. They would come in ready to argue or ready to try to be funny, almost, or try to evade. There's I wish I kept it, but we had the VHS of the Paul Westerberg interview that was never used. And he walks off, he gets pissed off, starts cursing and walks off. And it's funny as hell. It's like, why did you come on the show? Sorry, there goes a regular. But the show was very hip and it got it was kind of like, in some ways I consider Beasts of Burden it to be in the same position right now where it's not doing great business, but it's got a solid following and people still talk about it. It's won some awards, so it's a good thing to have around, I hope. But considering the money that they were spending, people were fascinated by Space Ghost, and it kind of had that, Pee-wee's Playhouse kind of thing going on where people in bands were into it. And, same thing with Yo Gabba Gabba, which we worked on years later, except that was, obviously more successful. But Space Ghost was also a very big influence on the people who watched it, who got into animation or did stuff, because it really set a lot of the tone. I mean, people who worked on Space Ghost drove the Adult Swim in a lot of ways. They were doing Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Dave and all those folks. And Space Ghost really was, it was the first shot over the bow of what the Adult Swim would become, was like anti-comedy in places. And what the fuck was that comedy? And was I supposed to get that comedy? And audience provocation comedy, and cheap as a plus of how a lot of their shows looked horrible to some people, in the way that like Dr. Katz did, which I think they picked up. But like people did not like the art style on a lot of these shows. And while the using old footage thing didn't quite work out in the long run, like they did it with C-Lab, and then they were going to do it with Birdman, but then they ended up rethinking how they were going to do Birdman. But Space Ghost was the first thing, and it was kind of like the pioneer. What can we do? What can't we do? Or what do we think we can do later when we have a little more push? And Space Ghost, I love that. Man, I love that show. I had problems working on that show because I was so nervous all the time about sucking and getting that. But they were very, very good to us, even when I was difficult to deal with, apparently, because I was. I heard somebody say that I was rude at the writer's room, and I think that I was just being. I don't think I was being. I was not intending to be rude. I felt bad when I found out that like some people were not like happy with me. Not Keith and Mike. They were probably not happy with me later on because I couldn't finish up a pilot that we were working on. I was unhappy with me. But I was going through some really, really, really bad stuff at the time with my imposter syndrome and my anxiety towards the end of it. And after Eltingville did not do well, after Eltingville was not picked up, I was really, really scared of everything. And but I went down there and I just think I was annoying because I just didn't know how to shut up sometimes, as you might know. And I was much less aware of how I came off. So I felt bad when I read that in an interview with one of the writers. I think it was Mike Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, if I've seemed aloof, it was because I didn't know how to approach the other writers and talk to them. I really just did not know how to be in a writer's room. I felt really, really uncomfortable. Um, and yammering like this in a writer's room, if I did that, that does not help anybody get to something. And I didn't like the feeling of competition, even though I didn't feel it was super, super competitive. A couple of people I thought were trying to, here and there, were trying to shut Sarah and I down, and other people, because writers' rooms are weird. They're competitive, and I can't do that. You know what I mean? I can't bid ideas like it's a card game. I can't. There's a reason I don't really like being around stand-up comedians the few times that I've been around them, because they're always on. And I know what that's like, because sometimes it's a defense mechanism, but I can't stand it in other people. And I don't like it when I do it. I used to do it all the time. Be funny as a fallback and as a mechanism, and sometimes be insulting because you think that's funny.
I was just thinking
So,
about
yeah.
this recently. Comedians are people who developed humor as a coping mechanism, but then they got so good at it and they understood it to such a degree that they're able to weaponize it. And then when you get a bunch of them in the room together, it becomes like, I don't know, sword fighting. Do you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
everyone's
yeah.
got to be
Yeah.
mean in the cleverest, funniest way.
Yeah. And well, I've never been around women who do stand up. So I'm not sure how that's like. And I've been, but it's like, yeah, it's just, and I definitely weaponized my humor when I was at conventions and stuff, because it was easier to joke around and be sarcastic and cynical. And then sometimes I would step over boundaries, and people felt that I was insulting them or being obnoxious. And then we'd end up in an argument, because comic books is full of socially awkward people who can't say what they mean, or in my case, shut up when I'm a little anxious and not good at articulating something. And I wasn't calm, and I wasn't screaming, yelling guy or anything like that. But I could get moody at conventions and things like that, and I would use humor, because humor is an icebreaker. But the fact is, if you break the ice with, like, dynamite instead of like a hammer or something, you're gonna throw people off and turn people off. So I didn't do myself any favors there, especially when Sarah's like the most agreeable, nicest, savviest person, and she was probably like swallowing her tongue at times when stupid boyfriend husband was opening up his mouth. But you live, and hopefully you learn and you unlearn, and that's something that I've been dealing with the last couple of years, many years. So yeah, writers' rooms is probably not a place for me back then. Probably not a place for me now either. I find them. I'm not good at competitive. I don't like competitive stuff, because I either get too competitive or I don't want to be competitive at all. So I either want to crush somebody or I want to work with them. This is why I think I like role-playing games and competitive and games where you cooperate. I like that. It takes a lot of the stress off when we're all working towards a goal. And with my limited experience with writers' rooms, and a lot of those are animation, which is going to probably be different. It's a different tier, different power, levels and personalities. But the attempt is, you're supposed to be cooperative, because the thing is the show or the script or the project. But there is always a kind of like, who wants, you're trying to be more clever, or even if you're just trying to be more helpful and more intuitive. You're always going to be, I mean, it's people throwing, taking their shots, and you can't help but wonder, was that about me? Was that about Sarah? Was that about our idea? Wait, are you calling, you know what I mean? And getting worked up, and then not knowing whether to say something, and then feeling, I mean, it feels like sometimes you're in a 8-man battle royale, and usually they're all men back then. So yeah, it was just not, I did not enjoy that. I kind of dreaded the couple of times that I was in a writer's room. Probably the best time was the first time, because I was there without Sarah, because I didn't know what, I was invited and they didn't know she worked on the script. But we worked that out there. I said, look, the way that I'm seeing this writer's room work, Sarah put as much into the script as I did. And I was very, very happy that the room went silent, and I was really scared because I didn't want them to think that I was doing the here's my girlfriend thing, dragging somebody else in. And it was really quiet. And then Keith Crawford just went, well, we'll put her in she should get a credit then. And I was just like, I never had any issues with anybody at the Cartoon Network. I honestly didn't. But we were also here in Staten Island for 99% of our time. We saw Mike and we saw Keith a lot, and Keith was fantastic. And we saw Mike a whole bunch of times when he was in New York or when we were in Atlanta. We never had any issues or problems. We just didn't. And there are people who, I've read some stuff. I can't attest to any of that, other than looking outside in. But it was terrific, and they put up with my being a weirdo for way longer than they had to. But I'm proud of the shows, most of them, and I'm still a fan. I love the show. I really do. There was a time when they were bringing it back for some game tap. Was it Game Tap? I think it was called. Yes. And they called us up to let us know, and that if we wanted to be involved. And the Game Tap people never called us, but it was just real. You know what I mean? It was kind of, I hope I really love that show. It was at the end though. It was hard to keep writing for the show because we wrote more story-like plots. We wrote more continuity and more regular stuff that had dumb stuff in it, rather than we didn't really do the surreal stuff or the trippy stuff or the absolutely confounding stuff. That's not where our heads were. So our episodes seemed to be less popular, I think, because of that, because we really, really went with the talk show format longer than most people. And then we were trying to do theme shows, and they just weren't as fucked up, is one of the phrases that was bandied. How do we fuck this up more? I'm not using that as a pejorative either. I mean, that was the show. It was like, what can we up the ante on to push things a little crazier, or to make something, just throw something out of nowhere. But there were people who were really good at doing almost an entire episode of non sequitur visuals, and I'm a much more concrete storyteller, and that's where a lot of our plots went. So our stuff doesn't seem to get mentioned too much, from what I know, from what I could see. It was funny at conventions, we'd have people come over and they go, "Oh my God, you worked on Space Ghost?" Because we had it on a sign or something, or they knew from some comic article, and we said, "Yeah," and we'd like, "Oh, we love it," and they'd ask us, they'd go, "Did you write Bat Mantis?" And we'd like, "No, we didn't do that one." "Did you write the Harlan County?" Did you? And they literally, once we'd had somebody who almost was like, it was like they were. It was like 20 questions, and we couldn't answer yes to any of them. And it was like, we were like never someone's favorite episode, it seemed. It was like I'd be like, no, we did the ones you don't like, probably, man. Just can we tell you which ones we did? And it was, I don't think anybody just their face dropped, but it was kind of like, oh, that's nice personality. You have a nice personality. But yeah. So did I answer every question you had about the show there?
Well, I'm just curious what the process of writing a script for Space Ghost, just because from what I understand, the interviews were filmed separately and then cut up in a way to just make them a little bit odd, or to give Space Ghost something funny to say, right?
You got 2 random interviews. This is how it first went. Things changed a little bit over time because the talk show format got creaky, so you would build things up, either a theme around it or some kind of plot that was going on during the interviews, or you would ignore the interview. You know, some of the other guys, Dave and everybody would ignore the interviews. Mike, you got two videos interviewing somebody, and that's it. And then you had to make an 11-minute script out of that. That was the process. There was no. The first one we did, which is very choppy because you can always tell when somebody's kind of new to something. The first Superman episode we did is kind of choppy for a lot of reasons, but we didn't feel our nautical legs or whatever the fuck we call it. We weren't comfortable yet. And the first episode we did was called Gum Disease, or Gum Disease, because I was being clever. Was Danny Bonaducci and Wynton Marsalis. We didn't ask for those videos, they just sent them to us. There was no plot given. There was no log line of like, can you have Danny Bonaducci treated this way? Be kinder to Wynton Marsalis? Or can you tie them up in some overriding storyline? Or the theme is, you know, nothing. That's why I kind of wigged out and asked Sarah to help me out, because making order out of chaos, even chaotic order out of chaos, is harder for me than writing so it was so open-ended. It was so not limited other than by budget and time. The things that we could do is we could use at that time clips from Turner holdings, from the Turner vaults, what they owned. We could throw in some limited live action, a cut to somebody, you know, or something. We couldn't ask for much animation or any animation. I don't know if we were ever at that point. Later on, they would sometimes do something for you, but you really weren't supposed to ask for new animation or new movements or scenes. You would try to work with things that they had access to and could alter. So like in, I think our second episode, Girly Show, we used the Herculoids, the two little blobs from the Herculoids, and we said use a clip of them, and here's footage that you could, here's this what they say, that you could
ADR, subtitle or something.
Subtitle. You could subtitle what they're saying because they're just going to do the whatever the fuck that was. And it was that they were two microbes inside Space Ghost's body who were admitting that they loved the nanny, Fran Drescher, because Space Ghost said, "I love the nanny with every fibra of my body," because he says fiber because he's an idiot. And then you zoom in on his body and you see the two fibers of his body, which is Gleep and Gloop, but they're microbes because we knew we didn't have money. So it would be funny to that. The joke is Space Ghost atoms or microbes or whatever the fuck also love the nanny and admit it, which is stupid. But they're Gleep and Gloop from the Herculoids, so you know the pop culture crap gets thrown in there. And also it's a cutaway that goes, you know, all of a sudden you're in his body and, you know, haha. But in the first episode, I don't know if we even asked for anything. They got in trouble because they used clips from Ultra 7, the Japanese tokusatsu show, the second Ultraman show. Turner Classic Movies had the broadcasting rights to this Canadian dubbed version that had jokes and stuff in it, sort of, that I don't think it had been shown in America. They were showing it at like 6 a.m. to fill up the Cartoon Network or Turner Classic Movies. Not Turner, TNT. And they started throwing clips of the monsters and stuff into Space Ghost. So we have one in one of our episodes. Those all had to be pulled. They did not have the rights to use scenes from those episodes in another project. They don't have the broadcast rights anymore. So that was like, oops. So they had to cut all that out. I think sometimes some music a couple of things had to get cut out because they were using scenes from Turner Classic Movies. There's a big montage in Girly Show of scenes from movies that goes really, really fast that Space Ghost supposedly put together. So the first episode is, yeah, you can don't ask for animation, don't ask for much movement, things like that. That was the only stuff we were told. Lazo really did trust, and Keith, and they trusted the writers to just do the job and turn in something that they could work with. That had enough good material that they could work into an episode, riff off of. The voice actors could do some when it comes to a phrase, has anything to do with
Improvise?
What's the word? What?
Improvise?
Yes, they could just improvise lines. Andy Merrill would improvise lines all the time for Brack and for characters. And sometimes we didn't love them. Sometimes they turned out to be people's favorite thing in the freaking episode. So you count your blessings. The show had a lot of people involved. More than anything that we ever worked on, other than Yo Gabba Gabba and Eltingville, of course, our scripts would air very closely to what we wrote. There were times that they would change things because they just didn't work. They weren't feasible. They weren't logistically able to put them together because of the limited motion and all that. There was one episode where the whole thing had to be reworked. The whole ending had to get cut. They just could not do it. It was all going to be musically timed to the performance, and it just, it couldn't cut. It came off on paper. It did not come off for real. So it was rewritten. Some lines were rewritten, and things changed. Somebody had a better line. One of the producers had a better line. It goes in. But on the whole, what you wrote was the bulk of the episode, which was not our experience on some other things. But again, when your budget is almost nothing and everybody's basically just having a laugh, and it's not super important, that really helped, And that first episode is very stiff, Gum Disease, because it's very back and forth. Literally, Space Ghost at a couple of plots goes, which I'm not sure if it was in the script or so, but I would cop to it if I reread it, because it's a by nature very just Space Ghost interviews two people. The overall thing was that Moltar had a cold and was fucking the show up, and the show eventually, a lot of my scripts, you may have noticed from reading my stuff and maybe seeing a lot of my stuff devolves into chaos. A lot of my scripts have very large, stupid, catastrophic endings. Whether it's a Simpsons comic or Milk and Cheese or Eltingville, definitely. But my humor stuff tends to turn into a night, all shit falls apart. Everything is, the kitchen sink. It's the end of the first Casino Royale. It's a mad world. It's, the end of a Warner Brothers cartoon, of a Tex Avery cartoon. It's just usually everything falls apart. People go mad. Things break. And so I didn't know, we wanted to have something happen that was visual and big as far as Space goes. But so we had Danny Bonaducci goes bonkers and starts screaming, and he breaks the glass in the studio, which lets all the air out, and all the characters start flying around. Zorak is flying around, and shuts the show down, and his alarms are going off. And that part was more of where we started going with the scripts, when we realized, basically they wanted the dumber stuff. And the reason that they could show that stuff is because they could just take an image of Zorak and then move him around in the computer and have still images floating around in there and stuff. And so you didn't ask for anything too crazy, but almost every season they would add a few new animation things. So you'd notice Space Ghost can now do one new thing, because you had to write to that was one direction. You had to write to the motions that they had. So Space Ghost going all righty, Space Ghost going like this, yelling at talking to the screen, the zoom in on him, the limited motion and limited visuals. you'd have to go, Space Ghost does this, Space Ghost does, and you'd have it 6 times in a script sometimes, or so that's why you could say in our scripts we didn't know what to do, so we started bringing in new characters. We brought his evil twin brother, which is the stupidest cliche on earth, but the main joke with his brother was that his mustache changed and his beard. Every time you saw him, his facial hair was different, and so many people didn't catch that. And I'm not saying this is a brilliant joke, but it cracked me up every time they would put Van Dykes on him and shit, And he was only mentioned at the end of one episode as he was tormenting Space Ghost, Tad Ghostal, because he was Chad Ghostal. It was just a dumb thing to end an episode that he was basically like, Cape Fear kind of stuff. He broke out of prison. He was coming for Space Ghost and reminding him of the times he tortured him as a child and shit. And it was just dumb. But then we decided to show him, and they were like, sure. And then we just used him a couple of times. I don't know if anybody else used him. People tended to, we didn't use Brack that much as I thought Brack was hilarious, because I felt Brack was not our character, if that makes sense. That was like, Andy should work with Brack. The other writers should work with Brack. He's been introduced their stuff. So we had, I like to use Lokar because I just thought he was funny as shit. And we used, nobody used Space Ghost's grandfather, who is
Randy Savage, right?
Randy Savage. I don't think anybody used him again. It's like, it really felt like people had their little, don't step on. And it was almost like unwritten or unspoken, but people really had their own little worlds within. I liked using the Council of Doom, who were kind of up for grabs because they were old characters. And I think we used Dr. Nightmare. I mean, his name is Dr. Nightmare. That's fucking great. I loved him. I liked using the old. Also, I'm an Alex Toth fan. And while I don't think Space Ghost is a great show, I think it's a great looking show. And so we brought back Jen and Jace and the monkey, and we brought Birdman in. We named him Harvey Birdman. Not that that's a big deal, but it was cool that they used his name later on. I thought it gave it some. So yeah, we had Dr. Nightmare, Attorney at Law, and we had Harvey Birdman, and then there was a show called Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, which is weird, a little bit, maybe. They did give us a chance to work on the Birdman pilot when it was not a Birdman attorney show, when it was Birdman interviewing people as a late night show that was going to be shown after Space Ghost. And it was going to be an 11-minute show with Birdman, who was going to kind of be like, if Space Ghost was like David Letterman or something. I forget how they put it. Birdman show would be like Bob Costas. It'd be the smaller,
Like Carson Daly or something like that.
Yeah, it would be a later night show and have its own feel. And it was supposed to stick with the talk show format, which obviously really didn't make a lot of sense because Space Ghost was already running out of ideas for the straight, let's interview a B celebrity or C celebrity and goof on them, especially after the B celebrities and C celebrities knew what the show was about and either would not answer questions or would just jerk around or would just say things like, I'm getting enough oxygen. They would start saying they're getting enough oxygen or playing with it because they were fans, some of them, which was great, but made for really bad interviews. And you'd have to cut people out or cut them down or just not even use them. So basically, you just took what you wanted from those tapes and used it. So on Girlie's show, we thought Fran Drescher was hilarious because her laugh was just Fran Drescher. And her, she had her New York accent. I think it's Queens or whatever. And so we came up with the gay. We came up with that Space Ghost was going to fall in love with her. I don't know exactly why, but I think it was triggered by something in the Carol Channing interview because Carol Channing was so game. We were going to make fun of her, we were ready to, pull up your sleeves, make fun of the celebrities. But Carol Channing was so into it and a good sport. So it gave us the idea to have her basically befriend Space Ghost, ignore the stupidity, ignore his stupidity, ignore the show, and just kind of talk to him about his problems. and realized that he had girlfriend issues and things like that. And then he hits on her because she had a great reaction to an answer where she just went, "Oh no," the interviews would spark ideas for back and forth, and you just keep going with it, and then you would do the, how can we fuck this up more, or how can we throw something in that's not just the interview? Do we have a visual? I would try to, where can we put a visual sting? Where can we put a non sequitur? And then sometimes you would just be like, you just find yourself writing Zorak saying shit because I loved Zorak, and Moltar was harder because he mumbles and he doesn't have much of a personality. But then you would just come up with something where you'd think of an old show that you could throw a clip in from, and you'd be off your story and onto something else, and you'd come back to we'd come back to our story or not. So yeah, Gum Disease is very straightforward, where we're using the interviews very, very stiffly and very straightforward, and only going to the other characters to break things up or to insult people or to insult Space Ghost. And then we had the ending. But in Girly Show, we were getting better at melding everything together. So Carol Channing right off the bat isn't an interview about her and her work, which is what the interview is and things like that. But it becomes Space Ghost asking her for romance advice and getting picked on by Zorak and all this stuff. And then Fran Drescher comes on, and Space Ghost instantly falls in love with her and instantly starts hitting on her. And then Fran Drescher doesn't respond. So we change the impetus of her interview, which is career stuff and all. So you don't know what they're being asked. We're just taking the responses and everybody is taking the responses and going with them. And then our third guest was Alice Cooper. Now, we asked for Alice Cooper because when we started realizing that we were coming up with the Girly Show, it's a very stupid, obvious joke, but we wanted to have Space Ghost have Alice Cooper on the show because he thinks he's a woman. Because Space Ghost is dumb and doesn't know anything about what he's doing. He doesn't know who Alice Cooper is. He doesn't know pop culture. So Alice Cooper comes on and just basically Space Ghost kicks him off the show, and Alice Cooper is nasty to him. And part of the reason for his short appearance is that Alice Cooper's interview was actually very boring. And I like Alice Cooper, I like Alice Cooper, the Alice Cooper band, but he's actually really quiet. And it's not like you're interviewing Elvira or a horror host or a rock and roll guy. You're just interviewing a dude. And he had his makeup on, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. But he's very mellow. He's a mellow dude. And we got nothing out of that interview. Like nothing to really, except for him calling Space Ghost a creep, which we were able to work, which worked. So instead of having a longer interview with Alice Cooper, we had a longer interview with Fran Drescher. And we had this joke. Every time she laughed, we had dogs and babies cry. Her voice was so that's my favorite. You actually I really love that her voice starts fucking the show up, and you start hearing children cry and dogs barking. I know, I'm sorry, but it made me laugh. It still makes me laugh that babies were crying, she was making babies cry all over the world or some shit like that. So that's how it was done. And you'd have to, talk to some of the other writers about their approach because, obviously different sense of humor, different pop culture knowledge and different angles. But that's where our episodes were about. Doing the talk show, but subverting the talk show with themes and stories and dumb shit. But hopefully people like they kept us working. They wouldn't have kept us going. And our last episode I think was really good. I think we did funny stuff, but it's hard to watch your own stuff. The first time I watched one of our episodes, I was actually depressed. I was like, would anybody laugh at this? I was very depressed when I first saw Eltonville when it aired, even though I had seen it already. For some reason, when it aired, I just absolutely felt horrible. I'm over that kind of thing now, thankfully. I loved our Yo Gabba Gabba stuff. I was very happy with our DC Nation stuff, as goofy as it was, and low budget. I liked it a lot. I don't think anybody else liked it, but I was really harsh and upset and unhappy. I was like, why am I not laughing? Like, maybe you're sick of this. You were, you know what I mean? I had a really higher weird standard, as if I was going to make our script was going to make me laugh as if I had watched it for the first time. That's not possible, So, but our last script, Lawsuit, got nominated for an Annie Award, which was amazing because I was an animation fan growing up. Like I told you, I never thought I'd work in animation, and to get nominated for an Annie was just, I mean, we knew we were going to lose. We were up against The Simpsons and other shows that had much better viewership and more fans, and The Simpsons episode was fucking hilarious. The clip that they showed was hilarious. Our clip, was terrible. I was sitting there going, we suck. Because we went to the awards. It's a long story, but yeah, we went to the awards, which was, I wasn't flying at the time. But they, behind my back, Sarah and Keith Crawford and my friend Paul set up that I would get put on a plane, and Sarah and I would go on a plane, and I'd be given a sedative from my and we were all packed, and Paul drove us to the airport, and we got on a plane. And it was the first time I had flown in years, and it was really funny. It was really funny. The flight back, though, I was bad because I was ready for it. I was like, oh no, now I have to fly. But that was a great experience. And Jay Stevens was there, who I love, and that's where Jay does the Land of the Nod and Sin comics, and again, a lot of character-based stuff there. And now he does a Kickstarter for his comic, and we talked about World's Funnest there, and he ended up doing the Alex Toth section for that. So that was a great trip. I met Glenn Murakami, who worked on Superman and Batman Beyond that we worked on. It was a nice Paul Dini. It was Paul is always great to us. I mean, he got us Superman and Batman Beyond, and Bruce. We didn't really know Bruce, but later we worked on a pilot on a story Bible, a series Bible for something that Bruce was involved with that didn't happen, but he was very. It was really cool that he hired us. That they hired us. I forgot about that. So yeah, that's Space Ghost, man. That was an amazing experience. It really, really was.
That's fantastic.
To get that call from the Cartoon Network, I mean, it might have been Mike. I can't even remember now. I guess it was Mike, because we got a call from the Cartoon Network, and I was sitting there going, we had to call back. Because I got the initial call because of Milk and Cheese. And Sarah's like, you got a call from the Cartoon Network. And I was like, what the heck? About a possible job. And I'm going, wouldn't it be funny if it was Space Ghost? Because we liked the show. We had seen it. We weren't like, hearing about it, we were like, they've run out of ideas. Space Ghost doing a talk show, talking to real people. They're out of ideas, man. And then we saw an episode. We laughed a lot. And it was like, and I was especially harsh because I was harsh on everything. I was like, this is going to suck. And I was like, oh my God, I really like this. And I remember saying, wouldn't it be funny if it was Space Ghost? And it was for fucking Space Ghost. And then we worked on Superman. We were supposed to work on Freakazoid first. That was supposed to be the first show we worked on, but that fell apart. Bunch of people left the show as producers and weren't in a hiring capacity. So Paul Dini was going to hire us for that. We were working on the episode when he left, and Bruce and they became freelancers that wrote for it rather than producing it anymore. And the whole tone of the show had changed, and they weren't into it. But we did Superman, then we did Batman Beyond, and we did the Eldenville pilot. We were asked to do more Batman Beyond, but we got the chance to do the Eldenville pilot. Originally, Mike Lazo had asked about doing Milk and Cheese as a show, and I wasn't willing to sell the characters. That's the main reason I've never done anything with Milk and Cheese that way. I'm not willing to sign the characters, to sell the characters, the rights to the characters. I would have retained publishing rights. That's what the deal was with Eldenville. they allowed for me to finish Eltingville as a comic. I didn't mind selling Eltingville if it came to that, because the characters are so obnoxious and I hate them in a lot of ways. I don't love them, if you know what I'm saying. I love Milk and Cheese, they're my kids. But the Eltingville characters I could definitely kick to the curb for a check or 2 or 7. But it was a great experience, but it didn't work for various reasons. And then kind of didn't do much more animation work. We did a little bit, then Yo Gabba Gab, but I should have gotten an agent. I wasn't into the idea back then, but we have no animation work now. I don't think we'll probably ever have any more animation work or TV work. It's like, I feel like, you have a time period when you make your mark, and if you don't strike while the iron's hot and let people know that you're looking for more animation work with an agent or whatever, some sort of representation, we just sat there and we didn't want to get an agent. And then at a certain point, I realized later on that I was afraid of getting an agent. I was afraid of doing more work. I was afraid of more responsibility. It's why I doomed my second Adult Swim pilot, which would have been a gas. And I honestly think could have sold to series. It was ready to go, but I kind of just ghosted them on some work that was a sentence or two. It was like 2005, I don't know, So, I freely admit it was my own problems that we didn't do the Tyrone's Inferno pilot, which got talked about a little bit. And they showed some artwork at San Diego Comic-Con, and then people like this never heard anything of it again. I was like, it's because I was super stressed, super anxious, and super afraid of the show actually happening and having it fail like Eltingville, or having it go forward and I was responsible for a production and people's time and money. So instead, what I did is I wasted people's time and money on the pilot development. Fucking kick myself all the time about that. You can't change the past. You can learn from it and do better. But boy, do I kick myself over that one. Because the fact that I had a pilot, an animation pilot, still is amazing to me, especially when I came to it sideways after abandoning an animation career and not wanting to go into animation at NYU after NYU and stuff. And to be able to actually make something that's still out there that more people will see a failure like Eltingville, a failed pilot, than ever see my comics work. And, more people will see Yo Gabba Gabba and stuff like that. It was fun while it lasted. And hopefully hopefully a fan will grow up who liked our stuff and drop us a line, liked our animation stuff. But you can't count on that. And I'm glad we got to do what we got to do, but I'm definitely bitter at myself. I'm mad at myself. It's no one else's fault that we didn't do more animation work. I mean, I had some reasons. We had other projects. I like doing comics. And one of the reasons I didn't get an agent was I didn't want to work on just anything. I'm really happy with the shows that we worked on. Sarah and I are really proud of the fact that we worked on things that generally people thought was of a good quality. Superman, Batman Beyond, Space Ghost, Yo Gabba Gabba, that had good writing and were done well as far as TV animation goes, as a non-prime time, and an agent, we do from some people's experiences, an agent wants you to work so that the agent gets paid. So we would have probably gotten more work if we wanted to push for it with those credits. Those were pretty good credits, I would think, for a writer. I mean, I don't really know how this stuff, I'm not going to say I know how fucking Hollywood or animation works, because we were very outside of it. We didn't live in LA. We were on Staten Island. It's not an animation hub. It's a racist hub. It's a beatdown hub. I don't know. But I think The Purge takes place here. If Sarah, I think Sarah told me that's where the Purge originally starts in the movie. So I was like, that makes perfect sense. I didn't want to get pushed into doing Garfield, if for lack of, I didn't want to do any toy show that came up or something like that, because the agent was like, hey, I got you a job on this. When we almost got work on Codename Kid Next Door, I think Sarah's got a story credit on that. She was supposed to. And we did one Ben 10 for the reboot. Yeah, I'm going over a ton of stuff now. I'm sorry about that. You can just cut
okay.
everything down to what you need. But, I'm just talking to you about, I'm actually just like, you and me talking about Space Ghost. You can put up whatever you want of it. It's on the record. But, you seem to really know the show and the Adult Swim. So pouring that out to you. But it was a great experience. I even the bad experiences we had in animation were not terrible experiences. They were just like frustrating. We don't have any horror stories. I know a few people in the animation industry who ended up in therapy because of it, or left the industry, or fucked their lives up in certain ways that wasn't even their fault. You got to always understand. I see it from two sides. You can't always be anti. You can't just be 500% anti-company. A lot of times the creator fucks up. Sometimes both fuck up. But the industries are what they are. They're just machines that move forward. They eventually get rid of. You have bad dealings with somebody in an industry. They're going to be gone soon too. You'll be gone, then they'll be gone. The people who fired you will be fired. The people who hired you will be fired. You'll be fired. You let go. No more work. And I contributed to a lot of my problems. I've always been open about that. I can't lie and say, "Oh, we had such an issue with so and so." Nope. Any problems that we had in the animation industry was because of me, because I was afraid, and I was not able to build on the career that we had. I never even called myself an animation professional. I just felt like, again, it was the imposter syndrome, and it was feeling high on myself. I was like, we had worked on like 6 or 7 shows, and I had a pilot. I had every right to call Sarah and I animation professionals. We were animation professionals, but because I wasn't doing it full time or anything, I kind of like, oh no, like Paul Dini is an animation professional. Jendi, my friend Steven DeStefano, who's brilliant, they're animation professionals. And I wouldn't see myself as an animation professional or take it seriously. I always hoped people would give us more work, but I never asked for more work. And the way that we got the second pilot, the way that we got Tyrone's Inferno, which uses characters from Eltingville, by the way, it uses the kids that we created for the Eltingville pilot. So Jane Dickey and the little kid who gets run over by the motorcycle, Ward Willoughby and Sikowski, who's one of the big kids in there. They were all our characters. It was Kid Gang with a monster character from hell who got abandoned in New Jersey. And the way we got it was that I wrote Keith and I said, I'm sorry, Eltingville didn't work out. We had a lot more material planned to kind of open it up. We felt bad that people thought that a lot of criticism of the pilot was that they thought the whole show was going to be nothing but trivia and pop culture references. And it's just that, if you're familiar with Eltingville, it's just that one story that is entirely predicated on pop culture references, because they have that trivia off and they're screaming questions at each other from TV and movie shows and stuff like that, and comics, to win the Boba Fett doll. And other episodes we're going to go free ranging. We're going to do other things with those secondary characters. And I said we had a lot. I felt we had places to grow. If it went, maybe we shouldn't have picked that pilot. I shouldn't have picked that story to adapt. And he wrote me back and he said, Evan, you can pitch to us. He said, you can pitch to us. You guys work with us. We're producers you've worked with. You can pitch ideas to us. And he told Lazo about the other character, the idea that, doing more stuff with the other characters. And Lazo gave us a shot right there, which should have shown me that Keith and Mike were behind us. And I should have taken that to heart. And I never did. I always felt like people were being nice to us for reasons other than our work, which is absolutely a terrible way to think about yourself or to move forward. And it's something that I've finally killed off. And I'm in a much better place emotionally. I'm not in a terrible place work-wise, but at least I didn't have one of those, I was on drugs and I was doing this and I was driving my car into trees. No Hollywood or rock and roll stuff or crazy stuff like that. It was pure emotional issue based self-destruction, just not interesting self-destruction that you do a story about. It's not like I flipped out and got kicked out of the studio or anything like that, or had a fight with anybody. Nothing like that. I just literally didn't turn in my work after we had done a script, designed all the characters, and done the Bible, and they were all accepted. I wouldn't change how the character was abandoned on Earth, because I was afraid that if I finally made the decision, it would get accepted and I would be forced to move ahead on this show. I didn't say that to myself at the time, but that's what I did. I basically kept pushing the decision making off until finally they shelved it. They said, we're sorry. They gave me a lot of time. So I cost myself the pilot. I cost Sarah, the pilot, her job, my job. And who knows what our future would have been? Who knows what our careers would have been? What if Tyrone's Inferno ran 4 years? I would have been established. That doesn't mean I would have stayed. A lot of people, get established and fall out. But, what the fuck? Whatever would have happened would have been better than what happened. But yeah, Space Ghost was a tremendous experience that I squandered with Tyrone's Inferno, that in Eltingville. I could have had a good run doing, writing that stuff. But, it is what it is, and I'm glad we have what we have. And boy, I think I owe you money for therapy, because I just poured out a ton of shit there that I haven't talked to my therapist about.
It's all good. This is
How much do you charge? How much do you charge an hour?
Well, the Patreon will be for $5 a month.
That's enough to make a Space Ghost episode.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you talking to me about Space Ghost. It's been a minor obsession of mine since I was, I don't know, 20, 21 years old. Listeners who are hearing this or, viewing this on the Patreon should know that it's almost 3 a.m. for Evan.
Yeah,
He's been extremely generous with his time. And
look,
I just want to say thank you.
Well, you're welcome, but I just realized what time it was, and I want to apologize because I have done marathon interviews before, and they're never planned. And I hope this wasn't. I hope you can put this out in sections. Maybe you can do an. You know what I mean? Here's Space Ghost talk. Here's comic book. You know what I mean? Break it down, because otherwise this is a death march for people to listen to. Trust
me, Gary Groth is going to come after me because I've got the market cornered on Evan Dorkin interviews.
No, Gary doesn't like my work, and I don't know if we have a high opinion of each other, so it doesn't. I got along with him the last few times I've seen him, okay, but yeah, everybody mellows. I mellow, but yeah, no, don't worry about that. Gary's not interested in what I have to say about comics. It was other people, It was the late Tom Spurgeon, and oh God, the late Kim Thompson, and a couple of other people, like I said, I'm a mid-carder, you know what I mean? I'm not a genius, and I'm not a hack. I'm in between, and I have my fans, but yeah, not Gary. But I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. This was an interesting talk for me to have, and a fun talk. And I can't believe we talked for like 6 hours, and I apologize about that. Holy shit. So I hope I don't lose Patreon backers for you.
No, it was fantastic. Thank you so much, Evan.
All right, edit the hell out of this.
Will do.
And I'll take care.
All right.